to Gap 2S. The Cold War wasn't just a battle of ideologies on the global stage, it was also a period of intense internal political dynamics within India. Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, the architect of India's foreign policy, faced significant challenges at home. The newly independent nation was still finding its feet, grappling with economic difficulties, social unrest, and the traumatic aftermath of partition. Gap 3S. Nehru's vision for India was clear, a secular, democratic, and socialist nation, but this vision wasn't universally accepted. He faced opposition from various quarters, including right-wing groups like the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, RSS, and conservative factions within his own party, the Indian National Congress. These groups favoured a more pro-Western stance, contrasting sharply with Nehru's non-alignment principles. Gap 3S. Key figures like Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, Nehru's deputy prime minister and home minister, played crucial roles in shaping domestic policies that indirectly influenced foreign policy. Patel's focus was on internal consolidation and security, which often meant taking a pragmatic approach to international relations. The death of Patel in 1950 marked a significant shift, giving Nehru more freedom to pursue his non-aligned vision. Gap 3S. The 1962 Sino-Indian War was another pivotal event that reshaped India's foreign policy dynamics. The war exposed India's military vulnerabilities and led to a re-evaluation of its defense and foreign policies. It also brought Defense Minister V.K. Krishna Menon into the spotlight, whose pro-Soviet leanings and controversial policies were both influential and divisive. Gap 3S. Amidst these internal dynamics, Nehru's leadership remained a stabilizing force. He adeptly navigated through the political turbulence, balancing diverse opinions and interests to craft a foreign policy that aimed for strategic autonomy. His ability to maintain this balance was a testament to his diplomatic acumen and political foresight. Gap 3S. As we delve deeper into India's Cold War strategy, understanding these internal political dynamics is crucial. They provide a backdrop to the intricate dance of diplomacy and strategy that Nehru and his successors performed on the global stage. Gap 3S. Now let's explore how this internal complexity translated into India's unique approach to the Cold War, starting with the notion of an elephant's two sets of teeth. The internal turbulence was not just limited to political opposition. Economic policies, land reforms, and social justice initiatives were hotly debated in the parliament. Nehru's government faced significant resistance from landowners and industrialists who were wary of his socialist policies. Additionally, the push for gender equality and women's participation in politics added another layer of complexity to the internal dynamics. The youth, inspired by global movements, also began to demand more radical changes, further intensifying the internal political landscape. Despite these challenges, Nehru's steady leadership ensured that India made significant strides in science and technology, laying the foundation for future growth. His ability to maintain a steady course amidst internal turbulence was crucial in establishing India's position on the global stage during the Cold War. Gap 3S. As we continue, we'll see how these internal factors influenced India's external strategies and its unique approach to the Cold War. To Gap 2S. The Cold War was not just a standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union, it was a global phenomenon that influenced conflicts and resolutions across continents. The superpower rivalry seeped into every corner of the world, creating a web of alliances, proxy wars, and diplomatic maneuvers. Gap 3S. One of the most significant examples is the Korean War, 1950 to 1953. This conflict saw North Korea, backed by the USSR and China, clashing with South Korea, supported by the US and its allies. The war ended in an armistice, but the Korean peninsula remains divided to this day, a stark reminder of Cold War tensions. Gap 3S. In Southeast Asia, the Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975, epitomized the Cold War's devastating impact. The US, fearing the spread of communism, intervened in Vietnam to support the South against the communist North, backed by the Soviet Union and China. The war resulted in immense loss of life and left a lasting scar on the region. Gap 3S. Africa, too, was a battleground for Cold War conflicts. The Angolan Civil War, 1975 to 2002, saw the MPLA, supported by the Soviet Union and Cuba, fighting against UNITA, backed by the US and South Africa. This prolonged conflict devastated Angola and highlighted how superpower rivalry could fuel local disputes. Gap 3S, in the Middle East, the Cold War played a crucial role in the Arab-Israeli conflict. The US supported Israel, while the Soviet Union backed various Arab states, including Egypt and Syria. The Yom Kippur War of 1973 brought the superpowers perilously close to direct confrontation, but also led to subsequent peace efforts, such as the Camp David Accords. Gap 3S, Latin America was not spared either. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 was one of the most dramatic episodes of the Cold War. The discovery of Soviet missiles in Cuba brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. The crisis was eventually diffused through intense negotiations, leading to the removal of the missiles and a temporary thaw in US-Soviet relations. Gap 3S, even Europe, the epicenter of the Cold War, saw its share of conflicts and resolutions. The Berlin Crisis of 1961, which led to the construction of the Berlin Wall, symbolized the division of Europe. However, the Helsinki Accords of 1975 marked a significant step towards détente, promoting human rights and easing tensions between the superpowers. Gap 3S. These examples underscore how the Cold War influenced global conflicts and resolutions. The superpower rivalry acted as both a catalyst for violence and a driver for peace initiatives. Understanding these dynamics is essential to grasp the full impact of the Cold War on the world stage. Gap 3S. With this broader perspective, we can now return to India's unique approach to the Cold War, examining how it navigated this complex global landscape with its two sets of teeth. The Cuban Revolution of 1959, led by Fidel Castro, was another significant event influenced by the Cold War. The revolution led to strained US-Cuba relations, culminating in the failed Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961. Despite the tensions, Cuba became a symbol of resistance against US influence in Latin America, further complicating Cold War dynamics. The Soviet-Afghan War, 1979 to 1989, was another critical conflict where the US supported Afghan Mujahideen fighters against Soviet forces. This war not only drained Soviet resources, but also left Afghanistan in ruins, setting the stage for future conflicts in the region. The end of the Cold War saw a wave of revolutions in Eastern Europe, culminating in the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. Mikhail Gorbachev's policies of glasnost and perestroika led to the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, marking the end of the Cold War era. The legacy of the Cold War continues to shape international relations, influencing geopolitical strategies and alliances to this day. Gap 3S. With this broader perspective, we can now return to India's unique approach to the Cold War, examining how it navigated this complex global landscape with its two sets of teeth. Gap 2S. During the Cold War, India's economic strategies were as crucial as its diplomatic maneuvers in maintaining its non-aligned stance. Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and his successors understood that economic independence was key to staying neutral in a world divided by superpower rivalry. Gap 3S. To achieve this, India adopted a mixed economy model, blending elements of socialism and capitalism. On one hand, the state controlled key industries like steel, coal, and energy, following the Soviet model. On the other hand, it encouraged private enterprise in sectors like textiles, consumer goods, and agriculture, taking a leaf from the Western playbook. Gap 3S. The 5-year plans, inspired by the Soviet Union, were central to India's economic strategy. These plans aimed to boost self-reliance by focusing on heavy industries, infrastructure, and scientific research. The first 5-year plan, launched in 1951, prioritized agriculture, irrigation, and energy projects, setting the foundation for future growth. Gap 3S. Another critical element was the Green Revolution in the 1960s, which transformed India's agricultural landscape. By adopting high-yielding variety seeds, modern irrigation techniques, and chemical fertilizers, India significantly increased its food production. This not only ensured food security but also reduced dependence on foreign aid, strengthening its stance of non-alignment. Gap 3S. Foreign aid and loans were also part of India's economic strategy, but with a twist. India skillfully navigated the Cold War's financial landscape, accepting aid from both the US and the Soviet Union without aligning itself completely with either. This delicate balancing act allowed India to secure resources for development while maintaining its political autonomy, a GAP 3AE. India's focus on education and scientific research further bolstered its economic independence. The establishment of institutions like the Indian Institutes of Technology, IITs, and the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, laid the groundwork for technological and scientific advancements. These institutions not only contributed to economic growth but also positioned India as a leader in innovation and self-reliance. GAP 3S. However, these economic strategies were not without challenges. Bureaucratic inefficiencies, corruption, and a slow pace of industrialization often hampered progress. Despite these hurdles, India's commitment to its mixed economy model and non-aligned stance helped it navigate the turbulent waters of the Cold War, GAP 3S. As we delve deeper into India's Cold War journey, we'll see how this economic foundation supported its unique diplomatic approach, allowing it to play a significant role on the global stage. Beyond India, the Cold War era saw other significant economic strategies shaping the global landscape. The Marshall Plan, for instance, was a pivotal US initiative to aid Western Europe's recovery after World War II. By providing over $12 billion in economic assistance, the US aimed to rebuild war-torn regions, stimulate economic growth, and prevent the spread of Soviet influence. In response, the Soviet Union established the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, COMECON, to support the economic development of its Eastern Bloc allies. COMECON facilitated trade and industrial projects among member states, reinforcing Soviet economic influence in the region. Meanwhile, the non-aligned movement, initiated by countries like India, Yugoslavia, and Egypt, sought economic cooperation among developing nations, independent of the superpower blocs. Through economic summits and trade agreements, these countries aimed to foster mutual development and reduce reliance on the US and Soviet Union. The Cold War's economic strategies were a complex interplay of aid, trade, and development policies, reflecting the broader geopolitical contest between the superpowers. These strategies not only shaped the economic trajectories of individual nations, but also left a lasting impact on the global economic order, GAP 3S. As we continue to explore the Cold War era, we'll uncover more about how these economic foundations influenced global diplomacy and the world we live in today. IP 2S. As the Cold War divided the world into two hostile camps, India, under the leadership of Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, sought a different path. This path was neither aligned with the US nor the Soviet Union, but aimed at creating a third force in global politics. Thus, the non-aligned movement, NAM, was born, GAP 3S. The seeds of NAM were sown at the Bandung Conference in 1955, where leaders from 29 Asian and African countries met to discuss mutual concerns and promote solidarity. This conference was a turning point as it laid the groundwork for a collective movement that would champion peace, sovereignty, and mutual respect. GAP 3S. The formal establishment of NAM took place in 1961 in Belgrade, Yugoslavia, during the first non-aligned summit. This summit was attended by 25 countries, including India, Egypt, Yugoslavia, Ghana, and Indonesia, who became the founding members. These leaders shared a vision of a world free from the constraints of superpower dominance, where newly independent nations could assert their sovereignty and pursue their development goals. GAP 3S. Over the years, NAM evolved and expanded, with its membership growing to include over 120 countries from Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Each member brought unique perspectives and contributions to the table, enriching the movement's diversity and strength. GAP 3S key conferences held in Cairo, Lusaka, and Havana, among others, saw NAM countries collaborate on various issues, from decolonization and disarmament to economic cooperation and cultural exchange. These gatherings fostered a spirit of unity and collective action, reinforcing NAM's commitment to global peace and stability. GAP 3S. One of NAM's significant contributions was its role in advocating for disarmament and nuclear non-proliferation. Member countries tirelessly campaigned for treaties like the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, and Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, CTBT, striving to make the world a safer place. GAP 3S, NAM also played a crucial role in supporting national liberation movements and anti-apartheid struggles, particularly in Africa and Latin America. By providing diplomatic and moral support, NAM helped many countries achieve independence and establish sovereign governments. GAP 3S, despite facing challenges like internal disagreements and external pressures, NAM remained steadfast in its principles. It continued to champion the causes of peace, equality and development, ensuring that the voices of the Global South were heard on the world stage. GAP 3S, as we move forward, will explore how India's involvement in NAM and its diplomatic maneuvers shaped its unique approach to Cold War politics, navigating the complexities of a world divided by superpowers. GAP 3S, the non-aligned movement's formation, was not just a political stance but a philosophical one, rooted in the principles of mutual respect, non-interference, and peaceful coexistence. These principles were enshrined in the movement's founding documents and guided its actions on the international stage. NAM's influence extended beyond its member states, shaping global policies and promoting a more balanced international order. The legacy of NAM continues to resonate today, as it remains a testament to the power of collective action and the enduring quest for a just and equitable world order. GAP 2S. As the Cold War raged on, India found itself in a precarious position, needing to secure its borders and ensure its sovereignty amidst global tensions. India's military and defense policies during this era were shaped by the need to navigate a world divided by superpowers, while maintaining its stance of non-alignment. GAP 3S. The Sino-Indian War of 1962 was a significant turning point. The conflict exposed the vulnerabilities in India's defense capabilities and underscored the need for a robust military strategy. In the aftermath, India embarked on an extensive military modernization program, seeking to strengthen its armed forces and fortify its borders. GAP 3S. The Soviet Union played a pivotal role in this transformation. Despite India's official stance of non-alignment, it developed a close defense relationship with the Soviet Union. This partnership saw India acquiring advanced weaponry, including MiG fighter jets, T-72 tanks, and other sophisticated military equipment. The Soviet Union also provided crucial training and technical assistance, significantly enhancing India's defense capabilities. GAP 3S. During the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971, the strategic alliance with the Soviet Union proved invaluable. As tensions escalated and India supported the independence movement in East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, the Soviet Union offered diplomatic backing and military support. The Indo-Soviet Treaty of Peace, Friendship and Cooperation, signed in August 1971, cemented this alliance, ensuring that India had a powerful ally in its corner. A GAP 3S, India's defense strategy also involved forging key alliances and participating in regional security frameworks. The establishment of the Indian Ocean Rim Association, IORA, and India's involvement in the Commonwealth of Nations were part of broader efforts to secure regional stability and counterbalance the influence of superpowers in the region. GAP 3S. Despite its military engagements and strategic alliances, India remained committed to the principles of non-alignment, advocating for disarmament and peaceful coexistence. India's participation in the Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT negotiations, and its push for a Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, CTBT, reflected its desire for a balanced approach to global security. GAP 3S. In essence, India's military and defense policies during the Cold War were a delicate balancing act. By leveraging strategic alliances, modernizing its armed forces, and maintaining a non-aligned stance, India navigated the complexities of the Cold War, ensuring its sovereignty and security. GAP 3S. The shield represented India's defensive strategies, including border fortifications and military modernization, while the sword symbolized its offensive capabilities and strategic alliances. India's shield was evident in its efforts to fortify borders and enhance military readiness, ensuring that any external threats could be effectively countered. The sword, on the other hand, was reflected in India's ability to project power and influence through strategic alliances and military partnerships, particularly with the Soviet Union. This dual approach allowed India to maintain a robust defense posture while also engaging in proactive measures to secure its interests. As we move forward, we'll delve into how India managed its dual approach of neutrality and strategic partnerships, embodying the wisdom of the elephant's two sets of teeth. Gap 2S. As India navigated the treacherous waters of the Cold War, it recognized the importance of building strong diplomatic relationships with other non-aligned countries. These partnerships were not only a testament to India's commitment to non-alignment, but also a strategic move to amplify its influence on the global stage. Gap 3S. India played a pivotal role in the formation and evolution of the Non-Aligned Movement, NAM, a coalition of countries that sought to avoid alignment with either the US or the Soviet Union. The Bandung Conference of 1955 was a landmark event where leaders from 29 countries across Asia and Africa gathered to discuss mutual interests and lay the groundwork for NAM. Prime Minister Nehru's vision of a united front of newly independent nations resonated deeply, establishing India as a key player in this movement. Gap 3S. India's diplomatic engagement with other non-aligned countries extended beyond mere political rhetoric. It involved tangible cooperation in areas such as trade, technology, and cultural exchange. For instance, India and Egypt, under the leadership of Nehru and President Nasser, developed a strong bilateral relationship that influenced regional politics in both Asia and the Middle East. Gap 3S. Another significant partnership was with Yugoslavia. Marshal Tito of Yugoslavia and Nehru shared a common vision for their countries and the world. Their collaboration was instrumental in shaping the policies and direction of NAM. This alliance showcased how non-aligned countries could leverage their collective strength to challenge the dominance of superpowers. Gap 3S. India's diplomatic relationships within NAM also had a profound impact on global politics. By providing a platform for the voices of smaller, newly independent countries, NAM challenged the bipolar world order and advocated for a more equitable international system. India's leadership in this movement underscored its commitment to promoting peace, sovereignty, and mutual respect among nations. Gap 3S. Moreover, these diplomatic efforts were not confined to the political realm. India actively participated in cultural exchanges and educational collaborations, fostering a sense of solidarity and shared identity among non-aligned countries. This cultural diplomacy helped to build bridges and create lasting bonds that transcended political alliances. Gap 3S. In summary, India's diplomatic relationships with other non-aligned countries were a cornerstone of its foreign policy during the Cold War. By fostering cooperation and unity within NAM, India not only strengthened its own position, but also contributed to the creation of a more balanced and just global order. Gap 3S. As we continue, we'll explore how this dual approach of neutrality and strategic partnerships helped India navigate the complexities of the Cold War, embodying the wisdom of the elephant's two sets of teeth. Beyond NAM, India also engaged with the superpowers, maintaining a delicate balance. Nehru's meetings with Soviet leaders like Khrushchev were crucial in securing economic and military aid without compromising India's non-aligned stance. Similarly, India's relationship with the United States was marked by strategic dialogues and aid agreements, particularly during the Kennedy administration. These interactions were pivotal in ensuring India's development and security. India's diplomatic efforts also extended to China, with Nehru and Zhou Enlai engaging in discussions to manage regional tensions and promote peace, despite the complexities of their relationship. Through these multifaceted diplomatic engagements, India demonstrated its ability to build bridges beyond the superpowers, fostering a network of alliances that contributed to global stability and peace during the Cold War era. Gap 3S. As the Cold War drew to a close, the strategies India had employed began to reveal their long-term impacts on its foreign policy. The non-alignment principle, which had guided India through a bipolar world, now had to adapt to a unipolar and later a multipolar world order. India's Cold War diplomacy laid the groundwork for a more assertive and independent foreign policy in the post-Cold War era. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. One of the most significant outcomes was India's enhanced ability to navigate relationships with major powers. The experience of balancing ties with both the US and the Soviet Union during the Cold War enabled India to maintain a pragmatic approach in its dealings with the United States and Russia. This diplomatic dexterity allowed India to secure strategic partnerships, defense agreements, and economic collaborations that bolstered its global standing. Gap 3S. Gap 2S. India's Cold War strategies also influenced its relationships with regional neighbors. The emphasis on sovereignty and mutual respect, core tenets of the non-aligned movement, became guiding principles in India's interactions with countries in South Asia and beyond. For instance, India's role in the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, SAARC, and its Look East policy were direct extensions of its Cold War diplomatic ethos. Gap 3S. Gap 2S. Furthermore, India's commitment to non-alignment and its leadership in NAM provided it with a moral authority that resonated in international forums. This legacy allowed India to advocate for the interests of developing countries and emerging economies in global institutions like the United Nations and the World Trade Organization. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. The economic strategies adopted during the Cold War, particularly the focus on self-reliance and mixed economy, paved the way for economic liberalization in the 1990s. These reforms transformed India into one of the fastest-growing economies, attracting foreign investment and fostering technological advancements. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. In summary, the outcomes of India's Cold War strategies were multifaceted. They not only helped India navigate the immediate challenges of the Cold War, but also shaped its post-Cold War foreign policy. India's ability to maintain strategic autonomy, foster regional cooperation, and advocate for a more equitable global order continues to be a testament to the visionary leadership of the Cold War era. Gap 3AS, Gap 2S. As we move forward, let's delve deeper into how these outcomes reflect the wisdom of an elephant's two sets of teeth and how they influenced India's diplomatic maneuvers on the global chessboard. Gap 2S. The Cold War era also saw India developing a robust defense strategy, which included the establishment of a strong military-industrial complex. This foundation allowed India to become self-reliant in defense production, reducing its dependency on foreign arms and enhancing its strategic autonomy. Gap 2S. Additionally, India's focus on scientific and technological advancements during the Cold War laid the groundwork for its future achievements in space and nuclear technology. The establishment of ISRO and the successful development of nuclear capabilities were direct outcomes of the strategic foresight during the Cold War. Gap 2S. These advancements not only bolstered India's defense capabilities, but also positioned it as a significant player in the global technological arena. In conclusion, the Cold War strategies adopted by India were instrumental in shaping its modern-day foreign policy, defense, and technological landscape. Gap 2S. As we continue to explore the aftermath of these strategies, it becomes evident that the Cold War era was a pivotal period that set the stage for India's emergence as a global power. Gap 3S. As we reflect on the aftermath of India's Cold War strategies, it becomes evident that the legacy of this period continues to shape India's current foreign policy. The principles of strategic autonomy and multilateralism, born out of the non-alignment movement, remain cornerstones of India's approach to international relations today. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. Strategic autonomy, a term that encapsulates India's desire to make decisions free from external pressures, was a vital lesson from the Cold War. By balancing relationships with both superpowers, India learned the importance of maintaining its sovereignty and independent decision-making. This legacy is clearly visible in India's contemporary foreign policy, where it continues to engage with multiple global powers without aligning itself exclusively with any one bloc. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. For instance, India's current relationships with the United States, Russia, and China are carefully managed to ensure that its national interests are prioritized. The strategic partnerships with the US, including defense and technology collaborations, coexist with a historical and ongoing partnership with Russia, particularly in defense procurement. Simultaneously, India navigates a complex and often contentious relationship with China, emphasizing dialogue and diplomacy. Gap 3S, Gap 2S, multilateralism, another key tenet from the Cold War era, continues to guide India's interactions on the global stage. India's active participation in international organizations such as the United Nations, BRICS, and the G20 illustrates its commitment to a multilateral approach. The country's leadership in advocating for climate change action, sustainable development, and equitable economic policies highlights its role as a responsible global actor. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. Furthermore, India's Cold War diplomacy has instilled a sense of moral authority and leadership among developing nations. This is evident in India's efforts to champion the interests of the Global South, pushing for reforms in global governance structures to ensure a more balanced and fair international order. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. In essence, the legacy of India's Cold War diplomacy is a testament to its strategic foresight and ability to adapt to changing global dynamics. The principles of strategic autonomy and multilateralism, rooted in the non-alignment movement, continue to guide India's foreign policy, enabling it to navigate a complex and multipolar world with confidence and clarity. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. As we transition to the next chapter, let's explore how this legacy of dual strategies, symbolized by the elephant's two sets of teeth, influenced India's diplomatic maneuvers on the global chessboard. The economic reforms of the 1990s, which opened up India's economy to the world, were also influenced by the lessons of the Cold War. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. These reforms have enabled India to become a significant player in the global market, attracting foreign investment and fostering economic growth. Additionally, India's advancements in technology and innovation can be traced back to its Cold War-era emphasis on self-reliance and strategic partnerships. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. Today, India is a hub for technology and innovation, contributing to global advancements in various fields. India's space program, spearheaded by ISRO, is another legacy of Cold War diplomacy. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. The program has achieved remarkable milestones, including the Mars orbiter mission, and continues to collaborate with international space agencies in the realm of healthcare. India's initiatives to provide affordable medicines and vaccines to developing countries reflect its Cold War-era commitment to global welfare. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. These efforts have positioned India as a key player in global health diplomacy. Cultural diplomacy, another facet of India's foreign policy, has its roots in the Cold War period. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. Through cultural exchanges and festivals, India continues to build bridges with other nations, promoting mutual understanding and respect. Educational collaborations have also been a significant aspect of India's diplomacy. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. By fostering academic exchanges and partnerships, India contributes to global knowledge and innovation. India's humanitarian aid missions, providing assistance during natural disasters and crises, are a testament to its commitment to global solidarity. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. These missions reflect the values of compassion and cooperation that were emphasized during the Cold War. Finally, India's participation in international peacekeeping missions underscores its dedication to maintaining global peace and security. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. This commitment, rooted in the Cold War era, continues to guide India's contributions to international stability. The principles of strategic autonomy and multilateralism, rooted in the non-alignment movement, continue to guide India's foreign policy, enabling it to navigate a complex and multipolar world with confidence and clarity. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. As we transition to the next chapter, let's explore how this legacy of dual strategies, symbolized by the elephant's two sets of teeth, influenced India's diplomatic maneuvers on the global chessboard. Gap 3S. As we delve deeper into the legacy of India's Cold War diplomacy, it becomes essential to understand how these lessons can be applied to contemporary global challenges. The world today is witnessing the rise of new powers, shifting alliances, and unprecedented technological advancements, creating a complex and dynamic international landscape. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. One of the most crucial lessons from the Cold War is the importance of strategic autonomy. In an era marked by the resurgence of great power rivalries and the emergence of new players like China, India must continue to uphold its principle of independent decision-making. This means carefully balancing relationships with major powers while safeguarding national interests. Gap 3S, Gap 2S. For instance, India's engagement in the Quad Alliance, consisting of the United States, Japan, Australia, and India, aims to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific region. Simultaneously, India maintains its historical ties with Russia and seeks to manage its complex relationship with China through dialogue and diplomacy. This approach allows India to navigate the intricacies of a multipolar world without compromising its sovereignty. Gap 3 says, Gap 2s. Another critical lesson from the Cold War is the value of multilateralism. As global challenges such as climate change, cyber threats, and pandemics transcend national borders, India's active participation in international organizations becomes even more vital. By championing multilateral initiatives and fostering cooperation, India can play a pivotal role in shaping a more inclusive and equitable global order. Gap 3s, Gap 2s. Furthermore, the Cold War era taught India the significance of economic resilience and self-reliance. In today's interconnected world, India must continue to strengthen its economic foundations by investing in technology, innovation, and sustainable development. By leveraging its demographic dividend and fostering a robust entrepreneurial ecosystem, India can position itself as a global economic powerhouse. Gap 3s, Gap 2s. As emerging powers and new alliances reshape the global landscape, India's Cold War experience offers valuable insights into navigating uncertainty and complexity. The principles of strategic autonomy, multilateralism, and economic resilience, deeply ingrained in India's diplomatic DNA, will continue to guide its foreign policy choices. Gap 3s, Gap 2s. In essence, the lessons from the Cold War are not just historical footnotes, but enduring strategies that can help India address contemporary global challenges. By applying these lessons, India can confidently stride into the future, leveraging its rich diplomatic heritage to build a more stable, prosperous, and harmonious world. Gap 3s, Gap 2s. As we move forward, let's delve into how the metaphor of the elephant's two sets of teeth encapsulates India's nuanced approach during the Cold War and its lasting impact on the global chessboard. The Cold War also underscored the importance of technological advancement and innovation. In today's digital age, India must prioritize cybersecurity, digital infrastructure, and technological education to stay competitive on the global stage. By fostering a culture of innovation and investing in cutting-edge technologies, India can not only safeguard its national security but also drive economic growth and development. Moreover, the Cold War era highlighted the significance of cultural diplomacy. India's rich cultural heritage and soft power can be leveraged to build stronger international relationships and promote global peace. By promoting cultural exchanges and showcasing its diverse heritage, India can enhance its global image and foster mutual understanding among nations. In conclusion, the lessons from the Cold War provide a robust framework for India to navigate the complexities of the modern world. By embracing strategic autonomy, multilateralism, economic resilience, technological innovation, and cultural diplomacy, India can effectively address contemporary global challenges and contribute to a more peaceful and prosperous world. There's an old saying in India, an elephant has two sets of teeth, one for show and one for eating. This saying perfectly explains how India handled the Cold War. Publicly, India said it was neutral, showing its display teeth to everyone. But secretly, it worked with both the US and the Soviet Union, using its eating teeth to get what it needed. This two-faced approach, this ability to be quiet but strong, became India's trademark under Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. It was a tricky balancing act, but it helped India survive the Cold War. Just like an elephant uses its tusks for display and its molars for grinding food, India showcased its non-alignment to the world while engaging in strategic alliances behind the scenes. This dual strategy allowed India to extract benefits from both superpowers, ensuring its security and economic growth. By playing both sides, India managed to modernize its military and infrastructure, setting the stage for its future as a global player. Nehru's vision and India's adept maneuvering during the Cold War era exemplify the wisdom behind the saying of the elephant's two sets of teeth. The Cold War was a very tense time. Two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, were fighting over different beliefs. It wasn't a fighting war with guns and bombs, but a war of ideas with smaller conflicts and a constant build-up of weapons. This rivalry spread all over the world. Countries felt pressured to pick a side, either the US or the Soviet Union. For newly independent countries like India, just free from British rule, the Cold War was a tough problem. Major events like the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Berlin Airlift and the Korean War were key moments on this global chessboard. Proxy wars in places like Vietnam, Africa and Latin America were battlegrounds for these superpowers. The competition extended to space, with the space race symbolizing the technological and ideological rivalry. Despite the tension, there were moments of détente, where both sides sought to ease the strain through treaties and negotiations. India, led by Nehru, chose a different way: non-alignment. Having just gotten free from Britain, India didn't want to get caught up in another big fight. Nehru believed that picking a side would hurt India's new independence and stop it from doing what was best for itself. This wasn't just a nice idea, it was practical. India, a big and diverse country with lots of needs, needed to work with both sides to get help, technology and support. Nehru played a key role in the non-aligned movement, which aimed to create a third path in global politics. He worked closely with other leaders like Nasser, Tito and Sukarno to promote peace and cooperation. Nehru's diplomacy was about balancing relations with both the US and the USSR, ensuring India could benefit from both without being dominated by either. Through this tightrope walk, India emerged as a leader in peacekeeping and international aid, showcasing its commitment to global harmony. India wasn't alone in wanting to stay neutral. Other newly independent countries, especially in Asia and Africa, felt the same way about the Cold War. This shared idea led to the Non-Aligned Movement, NAM, in 1961. The NAM gave these countries a way to speak up for themselves without pressure from the superpowers. It promoted peace, getting rid of weapons and letting countries decide their own futures. The roots of the non-aligned movement can be traced back to the Bandung Conference in 1955, where leaders from 29 Asian and African countries gathered to discuss peace and cooperation. Key figures like Yugoslavia's Josip Broz Tito, Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser, and India's Jawaharlal Nehru played pivotal roles in shaping the movement. The NAM was built on principles of sovereignty, equality and non-interference, aiming to protect the interests of newly independent nations. Over the years, the movement grew, holding regular conferences and becoming a significant force in global politics, advocating for the rights and development of its member states. Even though India said it was neutral, its relationship with the Soviet Union was complicated. India was friendly with the US, but it agreed more with the Soviet Union's socialist ideas. This leaning towards the Soviet Union became stronger for practical reasons. India got weapons from the Soviet Union, especially after the 1962 war with China, when the West didn't help much. The Soviet Union also supported India's position on Kashmir at the United Nations. Despite its tilt towards the Soviet Union, India maintained its leadership in the non-aligned movement, striving to balance its global relationships. India played it smart during the Cold War, sometimes using one superpower against the other. For example, during the 1956 Suez Crisis, India criticized the invasion of Egypt, siding with the Soviet Union and Arab countries. India also became good friends with Indonesia, another important member of the non-aligned movement. These relationships helped India become influential within the NAM. India maintained a delicate balance between the US and the Soviet Union, securing economic and military aid from both sides. Despite tensions with China, India managed to navigate complex regional dynamics and even attempted to mediate conflicts with neighboring Pakistan. India's diplomatic efforts extended to Africa, fostering trade and cultural exchanges with newly independent African nations. Through these maneuvers, India solidified its position as a key player on the global stage during the Cold War. India's strategy wasn't always easy. Sometimes both superpowers were annoyed because India wouldn't pick a side. The 1971 Bangladesh War, where India helped East Pakistan become Bangladesh, hurt India's relationship with the US, which supported Pakistan. Also, India's power in the region led to conflicts with neighbors like Pakistan and problems with China. But India also did well. Its role in the NAM made it more important on the world stage. The end of the Cold War saw the collapse of the Soviet Union and the fall of the Berlin Wall, leading to a new world order. Global economic dynamics shifted, with new economic powers emerging and international trade becoming more interconnected. Technological advancements, especially the internet, revolutionized global communication and information sharing. The outcomes of the Cold War reshaped international relations, leading to new alliances and a focus on global cooperation. The Cold War is over, but India's way of doing things continues. India's Cold War strategy of staying neutral and making its own decisions still guides its foreign policy today. India's ability to work with many different countries, balancing its needs and making partnerships, comes from its Cold War experience. During the Cold War, India was a founding member of the non-aligned movement, which allowed it to maintain strategic autonomy without aligning with either the US or the Soviet Union. This approach enabled India to receive aid and support from both superpowers while avoiding entanglement in their conflicts. Today, India's legacy of strategic autonomy is evident in its independent foreign policy, which emphasizes multilateralism and diversified partnerships. This legacy also extends to India's defense strategy, where self-reliance and indigenous development are key priorities. Economically, India's Cold War experience has shaped its approach to global trade, focusing on building a resilient and self-sufficient economy while engaging with the world. Today's world is complicated, with power shifting and new alliances forming. India's Cold War experience is still relevant. Being able to work with many different countries and make your own decisions is more important than ever. India's Cold War diplomacy, with its focus on non-alignment and independence, provides a good example for navigating today's complex world, a world where we still see the effects of the Cold War. From geopolitical tensions to economic policies, the Cold War's legacy continues to shape our world. Exposing the hidden links between history, business, and geopolitics. Welcome to Study Biz His Geopolitics Knowledge for Everyone. Thanks to the support of our ONC Foundation. Today we're exploring the thrilling intersection of business, history, and geopolitics. Imagine the Silk Road, not just a trade route, but a highway of cultural and economic exchange that shaped empires and economies. Or think about the Cold War, where corporate espionage became a tool of geopolitical strategy. SBHG dives deep into these fascinating stories, making complex topics understandable and engaging. We connect the dots between past events and today's business landscape, giving you insights that are both historical and practical. From the Medici family's banking empire in Renaissance Italy to China's rise as a global economic powerhouse, we cover it all. Our videos provide a unique lens on how history and geopolitics influence business decisions in global markets. Don't miss out. Hit subscribe and join us on this journey to decode the global game. With Study Biz His Geopolitics, you're not just learning, you're gaining the knowledge to navigate the world. Thanks for watching. Remember, at Study Biz His Geopolitics, knowledge for everyone. Thanks to the ONC Foundation.